Good evening. My name is Monty Martin,
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
and we are the Dungeon Dudes. And welcome to our homebrew workshop for October 2022, where we are looking at low-level spells in D&D 5e.
Yeah, so we are looking at spells between first and fifth level, I believe.
Yeah, submitted by our patrons.
Submitted by our patrons. We had over 40 submissions. With us doing our reviews and sort of giving feedback on these, we probably won't be able to do 40. We most likely will struggle to get through 10 if that's even possible. But we want everybody to know that if you did submit a spell to us, we appreciate all of the work that you put into your homebrew spells. We appreciate taking the effort to submit it, and we appreciate being open to our feedback. A few things that I want to say right off the bat is, number one, Monty and I, although we love D&D and like to think that we know what we're talking about most of the time, with our review and our suggestions, if you're the creator of the spell, feel free to take or leave what we throw out there. We're just offering what we kind of had thoughts on, what we think is cool, what we think we might change. But really, at the end of the day, it's your spell. If it's working at your table, if you're playtesting it and everybody's having fun with it, then you're doing a great job. Also, with the spells that we pick tonight, they are not in any order, and we did not pick the ones that we thought were best. What we usually do is Monty and I will read the spells out loud. Some of them we're just like, yep, that's great, and we have nothing else to say about it, which isn't really good for conversation points. Others we read, and then Monty and I have a back and forth for like 5 to 10 minutes, and we're like, okay, that one is one that we can talk about. So we usually set those aside as the ones that are most exciting to put onto our show so that we can actually have open discussion about those spells. So yeah, we are here tonight to talk about some of the ones that popped out to us as great discussion points, but everybody, you did such a good job. There was so many cool spells to look at.
Yeah, and of course, credit where credit is due. All the spells that you're seeing tonight are the creations of their authors, who we are, and we graciously thank everyone who has made a submission. These are their works, not ours, and so we want to make sure that what we have done is we've kept first names or screen names only with last initials. So for those of you who have submitted your work, this is all your stuff in its raw form, whatever you send to us. So if there's any spelling errors or any tweaks or anything like that, we weren't really looking at any of that in your submissions or anything like that. So once again, just for myself, a big thank you to everyone who did make a submission. As Kelly said, our goal here is to provoke have a thought-provoking discussion. And so for some spells, we're like, yeah, this is really cool. Not too much to say. And for others, we're like, wow, this is an interesting idea. Let's think about how we can actually workshop this further as befits a homebrew workshop. Of course, we will be bringing this format back a lot more regularly for all of our Patreon supporters. So keep an eye out if you are on our Patreon, if you are on our Discord, for when the next round of submissions will be up for our homebrew workshops, because we want to at least get back to doing this on a regular basis now that all of our writing deadlines and everything like that are through. Because for these homebrew workshops, just making the selections for what we're going to talk about does take us some extra time compared to our normal Q&As. So we like to make sure that and it also requires more work from all of you out there submitting things too. So we like to make sure that we have the space to give that all the attention that it's due. With that, I think we've got about 5 to 8 submissions that we've narrowed it down to from the 40 that we got. If we have more time, we might grab a few more. If we don't get to them all, I'm sorry, and we will try to leave a little bit of time at the end of the discussion tonight to take some questions from all of you in chat as well. So with that, let's pull up our first submission here.
Yeah.
I just like this one right off the bat. This is Power Word Fall by Christopher L. It is a 5th level enchantment spell with a casting time of 1 action, a range of 60 feet, verbal components only, and a duration of 1 minute. How does it work,
Uh,
Kelly?
So, with this spell, you speak a word of power that can overwhelm the strength of one creature you can see within range, causing them to fall to the ground, unable to get back up. If the target has 125 hit points or fewer, it is knocked prone and its speed is reduced to 0. Otherwise, the spell has no effect. If the creature is airborne while affected by the spell, they fall to the ground. The prone target must make a strength saving throw at the end of each of its turns. On a successful save, the spell ends for them. It is available for bards, sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards. Right away, I just, at first, when I read Power Word Fall, I was like, where are we going with this?
Hmm.
But after reading the description, I'm like, oh, that's actually a really handy
Yeah.
idea, especially against flying enemies. It can be really, really good to get them down to your level. If you've got fighters, barbarians, paladins, people who don't have the best ranged attacks, being able to use a spell to pull them down to the ground is really, really handy.
Yeah, I think that we have a few interesting mechanics at play here, simultaneously. The first thing that I think is that if you really look at this spell on paper, it is a concentration-free version of Tash's Hideous Laughter. Because Tash's Hideous Laughter being a 1st level spell, it causes the target to fall prone, and then they can't get up until they make their save against it. But then the target does get additional saving throws if they take damage to shake out of the effect. With this spell, there's no saving throw against the additional effect. It's just how many hit points does the target have remaining versus that, and then it has subsequent saves to shake off the effect. A strength saving throw, which some targets are really good at making, some targets are really bad at making. And we're going for a 5th level spell. And so I think one of the things that's immediately striking about this spell is, like, Kelly, you went right to the what happens using this against a falling creature, because it's called Power Word Fall.
Yeah.
But let's not even go there first. Let's just use it against a target on the ground, right?
Knocking them prone, reducing their speed to 0.
You are stuck there until you make a strength save, right? And there's no there's no saving throw against it, right? So the question there is that alone, that benefit, as I said, Tasha's Hideous Laughter is a 1st level spell. So we can already do what this spell is doing with a 1st level spell slot. It's just that we have to have a saving throw to do it, and we have to have concentration to do it. So this spell is a great example of when you upgrade from a 1st level spell to a 5th level spell, is that enough to justify removing the concentration requirement and bypassing the saving throw?
Are there other 5th level spells that are, I guess, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but are there other 5th level spells that are examples of sort of concentration free alternatives to lower level spells?
Yes, it's pretty obscure, but it's the spell that turns stone to mud and mud to stone.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's kind of basically entangle. But it's a little different, just like this one is a little different as well. So
Yeah, and I mean, there are a lot of interesting aspects to this spell, and the
yeah.
fact that knocking a creature prone is great for melee combatants, but not necessarily great for ranged combatants. So it's not an all-out win in that regard. Um, doing it concentration free, I think it would fly. I mean,
Or
no
you
pun
wouldn't.
intended, it would
Yeah,
fall.
it would fall. Yeah, the spell I'm thinking of is Transmute Rock.
Yes.
And a few folks in chat have rightly pointed out that because of the range of the spell, if you are on the ground and the target is in the air, the most damage it's going to take is 66. But the thing is that if you're in the air and the target is in the air, then that goes out the window, right? Because conceivably, if you and your target are both 1,000 feet in the air and you use this spell on them, then they're gonna drop like a stone, right?
I'm my worry with this spell is that with the way that it's currently worded, if we are in an aerial combat situation, it just says they fall to the ground. It doesn't specify, like, if you're 1,000 feet in the air riding on a dragon fighting another dragon, and you cast this spell on the dragon, do they immediately fall 1,000 feet to the ground?
I think that they fall like you could just tweak the wording and say they fall, right?
Yeah.
There is rules in Xanathar's for falls from very high heights. Like I think it says that a creature falls like 1,000 or 500 feet in the first round, and then they fall the rest. Like terminal velocity is pretty fast. Like you have to be pretty high to take a while to fall. So
The idea of falling 500 feet in 6 seconds is scary to me, but I guess that checks out.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Um, I think there's two things that you can do with this spell. If you were like, I think straight up, I would play test it as is, because
yeah.
really and truly, Tasha's hideous if a dragon in the air fails its saving throw against Tasha's hideous laughter, which is a first level spell, it's knocked out of the sky and it falls.
Hmm.
The same thing would happen if a battle master hit them with trip attack, right?
Right? Yeah.
So knocking someone out of the sky, I don't think that we're going to get, like, there's already a lot of ways. The biggest difference here is the threshold under which this occurs. And I think that if you play tested it in power word kill and power word stun are the models for the spell for the hit point threshold. Power word kill affects 100 hit points or fewer. Power word stun is 150 hit points or fewer. What if you said with this spell that it had to affect a target that was 50 hit points or fewer, but you could upcast it to increase the hit point threshold?
That's a cool idea because most of the power word spells are higher level.
Yes.
So that would actually add a really cool upcasting capability to it. I also just saw from the creator of the spell in chat, the intention was that the creature would fall 500 feet per round like the rules in Xanathar, which checks out, makes sense, love it. I actually really like that idea, Monty. I like the idea of if you lowered the hit point threshold but allowed it to be upcast to increase the hit point threshold. That's a really interesting way to. It almost is like introducing a power word spell at an earlier level, but still allowing it to be as powerful
Yeah.
as the others at the same level as those. But that's honestly like I would play test it as is. And if you felt like you needed to lower the capabilities of it a little, that would be a great way
Yeah.
to implement that.
I think the other thing that you could do, and this would be the quote unquote like nuclear option, would be saying that the target falls without taking any damage. So it's a feather fall, right? So that way you get the control effect of the spell, but you don't get the, because let's put it this way: if you are fighting on an airship, 2,000
Mhm.
feet in the air, and you cast the spell on a target and they fall, even if they don't die from the fall, they're not coming back to the fight.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know what I mean? So you could just say that they don't take damage from the fall, and that would give you the effect and all those things, and
Although I personally like that the idea, like I would most use this spell against a flying target with the intention of doing a bit of damage to them and pinning them to the ground. That would be my ideal use of my 5th level spell slot against a weakened flying target.
Yeah, I guess the question is this supposed to be a damage spell or a utility spell? Or is it supposed to be, because I feel like this is one of those spells that it's it almost risks being an automatic win spell in the situations where it's been like made to work, right? And so making it just slightly less of an automatic win might be a balancing factor, but and
It's so hard to say though, because there's so many spells that do like knocking people prone. Even like, I don't
yeah.
know, I as a monk I stunning striked a dragon out of the air once, and that was a
Yeah,
game over scenario.
I think that the thing here is that 125 hit points at fifth level for fifth level spells. There's a lot of monsters that are that level that's how, like, they are at full hit points well under that. Like there's a
I I
there's a
do think we could lower that threshold is really the only note that I
yeah.
truly have here is yeah, because how many hit points do characters have
Mhm.
at that level? I mean, maybe some will have over
I
125,
I I
but
feel like I feel like 120, like, this is where playtesting is where you're going to find what the number is, right?
yeah.
Like it might be, I think on the extreme end it would be 50, but I feel like something between 75 and 100 might be the sweet spot for it. I think 125 might be the higher end. I wouldn't go higher than that. Like I would not do 150, because I feel like that is hitting a very wide net. Like if you could use this spell, like I feel like this spell you should have to do a little bit of damage to a young dragon. Like I'm thinking of like the young red dragon, which is CR10,
Mm.
right? I feel like you should have to do a round of damage to that dragon before this spell can just take them out, right? Yeah.
That's fair. Aside from that, though, what I will say, Christopher L, is this spell has a lot of great flavor to it. The direction is great.
Hmm.
Um, I would say, again, test it as is. I would say that at worst, you're like 90% of the way there. At best, you've already got a decent spell. Really cool implications
Yeah.
for its uses on the battlefield, which at first don't seem entirely like I don't know about and maybe not for me, but like whenever I have a new player, if a spell doesn't show that it does damage, new players tend to be like, eh. But I feel like this spell has a lot of secret potential that
Yeah.
that isn't immediately apparent when you first read it. But the more you think about it, if you think about it for a few seconds, you're like, oh yeah, there's some cool things I can do, and
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah, and for those, a few people in chat asked, why don't you just put an initial save on it? And I think that I can clearly, not to speak for the creator, but like the power word spells, part of what is cool about them is that there isn't an initial save, right?
Yeah.
It's based on this hit point threshold idea. It's one of the few examples we have of spells that do things without a saving throw. And in fact, we tried to work with that a little bit in Sebastian Crow's Guide to Everything, because
Hmm.
we did ask the question with a couple of the spells that we made, of what how strong can you make a spell without requiring a saving throw? Like what is the limit there?
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting. Power word float. Oh, you could do the inverse of this. Power
So
word.
people just float into the air.
Yeah, well, that would be levitate. Like that, you
Yeah,
take
yeah.
levitate, but remove. Like I feel like that would be a 6th or 7th level spell, probably,
Could you cast it on yourself to just float?
maybe.
I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
um, so why don't we move on to the next spell? Again, thank you, Christopher L, for submitting Power Word Fall. Um, Up next, we have Appo's Interfering Appendages by Mike M. Before anything else, that's a really fun spell name to say out loud. Appo's Interfering
Yeah.
Appendages.
Yeah.
Third level, Conjuration. Casting time of one action, range of 60 feet, components, verbal, somatic, and material. The material component is the hands of a small clock and a pinch of tar. Duration, concentration up to 1 minute, available for wizards, sorcerers, and warlocks.
You cause a pair of meddlesome arms to erupt from the torso of one creature you can see. First of all, that's a crazy mental image. I just this idea, the name of the spell. This is why we picked this one. Um, the target must succeed on a charisma save. It takes 46 psychic damage and suffer the effects of the arms for 1 minute. On a successful save, they take half damage and the arms disappear. For the duration, the arms strike, grab, and generally flap about, hampering the target in a variety of ways. At the end of each of its turns, the target can make another charisma saving throw. Um, this sentence didn't end here, but I guess the target, you have to add the text. The target can make another saving throw to end the effect on a success. On each of the target's turns, choose one of the following effects, which lasts until the start of their next turn. Interfere. The arms prevent the target from using their action to attack, cast a spell, use an object, or take reactions. The target also has disadvantage on con saves to maintain concentration. A spell cast with subtle spell, meta magic, is not affected by this feature. I've never seen a spell call out a class feature like that before. Interesting. Obscure. The arms covered the target's eyes, causing the blinded condition. Delay. The arms grab onto walls, furniture, the leg within 5 feet of the target, reducing its speed to 0. Fair. The arms make a pair of unarmed strikes against the target using your spell attack modifier. Each arm that hits does 2d6 magical bludgeoning damage. Alternatively, the arms may attack creatures within 5 feet of the target instead. I just love the idea of like arms growing out of you and just beating you up.
Yeah, but before we get into like the mechanics and any of the wording, but I just want to say the visual elements that you've created with this spell
Yeah.
is so on point. The reason why we picked it is as Monty and I read the name of the spell and the initial description, we were already laughing and talking about what this looks like, what this feels like. Spectral arms bursting out of somebody's torso and flap. The fact that you use generally flap about gives me such a great mental image of this spell. So this is a really quirky spell, and I appreciate that. So Mike M, good job on the flavor. Now, it's interesting. My first thought was that interfere was too powerful, but then I remembered that I was like third level spell, and you can stop them from taking an action, such as attack, cast a spell, or an object, or reactions. But then I remembered hypnotic pattern is a third level spell, and it incapacitates targets.
Yep.
So like who am I kidding? This is on brand and
Yeah.
on point,
This
so
is a
we're fine.
this is a wonderful spell. My only notes are really, I think that you can save a lot of wording by saying I would do, you can incapacitate the target, restrain the target, or blind the target. Because this is the interesting thing about those conditions. So the interfere one is stopping the target from attacking, casting a spell, and is messing with its concentration. If it's incapacitated, then the incapacitated condition is a really weird condition, because it all it says is the target can't take actions or reactions. So you can still move when you're incapacitated. It's just that a lot of effects that incapacitate you also reduce your speed to 0. Attacks don't have advantage against you if you're incapacitated at all. There's no other penalties or anything. You have no penalties to your saving throws or anything. So by incapacitating someone, you stop them from acting, but their defenses are actually pretty fine. If they're restrained, you hold them in place, and then their speed becomes 0. Their speed is 0, but then they also now have attacks against them have advantage, but they can still act and defend themselves if they need to. So that might be an interesting way of like doing the interfere, delay, and then blinded. I would just throw blinded in because it's fun. I think that tactically speaking, you'd probably want to go for the restrained or but there's circumstances when you would. And I love the assault. Yeah.
I do think that by using incapacitate, you clear up a lot of subjectivity, because one thing that
Yeah.
Monty and I had discussed is when you specify that it stops you from using your action to attack, cast a spell, use an object, or take reactions. Does this mean that something like uh, using a class ability is still
Yeah.
allowed?
Yeah, like there's a whole bunch of like could I still channel divinity?
Yeah,
Y-
yeah.
Yeah.
Can I still like? Yeah, there's so many class abilities. Like channel divinity is a great example,
Mhm.
um, and I think that it actually makes more sense that interfere incapacitates the target, because then, if I read this, can I take the help action? Because maybe the hands are helping me out in that regard. Maybe they're helping hands.
Yeah.
But that's the interesting question that comes up with the way that it's currently worded is, well, there are other actions I can take. Perhaps that was your intention, though, in which case, cool. If you would like me to be able to use my action for dashing, disengaging, hiding, using character abilities, or perhaps feats, or the help action, dodge, these are all potentially options.
Yeah, so and if you don't want to incapacitate because you don't want to automatically break concentration, you could simply say the target can't take actions or reactions.
Right.
Right? Instead of using incapacitate, you can just use the language of that and say it can't take action or reactions. Because I do think with the interfere, it's just that there's so many other things that then it feels like it would make sense for the hands to interfere with you, but without saying, like, you either have to list a ton of different things because like interfere, it does totally make sense that these arms would prevent you from hiding. Like I'm just imagining the rogue trying to hide and the hand just being like, he's here, he's here.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like a
like
pointing,
they're
like,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
So depending on the design intention, if the intention was that this list is specific, then cool. But when I read it, it started to be like, oh, but I could still do this, and I could still do this, and I could still do this, um, which is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
so I think that's the only one that I would like my only notes. Should each arm do a separate attack? I think that the arms should just make one attack together.
yeah.
Yeah,
I,
rather than two, just for like make it one attack that does 3d6 damage. Um I also really like, but you know what? You know what? The other thing that would just be funny is if the arms could grab someone else. Like the
yeah.
arms spring out from you.
So they could grapple someone else.
Yeah.
That would be funny. Oh, but if you target, okay, now here's where we're getting crazy. If that was an option, if I target a creature and have them grapple the creature next to them, are both targets now technically grappled? Because one, they're stuck to each other.
Yeah. I don't know.
So really, it's me choosing that the spectral arms out of one's torso is grabbing another
Yeah,
person.
that'd be
It,
so funny.
I do want to read the creator's thoughts here because I find it quite interesting. I kind of agree with their thoughts. Creator's thoughts: I tried to come up with a simple way to allow the arms to disarm the target or steal items from them and throw them up to 30 feet. But I felt the spell was complicated enough as it is. I'm not sure how the spell would scale with upcasting, if at all. It might bog down gameplay to have multiple targets under this effect. Interesting. And right now, currently in my thoughts, I kind of agree that anything added onto this spell would kind of clutter it up a bit. I like your idea of disarming or stealing things, but that seems like it seems like more text that we don't need when the spell already seems to be doing enough. And I'm not sure what the upcast would be. Maybe this is a spell that doesn't require upcasting, because I don't know if targeting multiple targets uh, is overly complicated.
The upcast could just be that the arms do more damage when you punch people with them.
True. But
Yeah,
then that has no effect on other. Like, I probably wouldn't upcast this
yeah,
spell because I would most likely use it for interfere.
yeah. One other thing as well, that you might have to add to the spell for balancing, you might have to make the caster use their bonus action to command the arms.
Yeah.
Right? That might be the thing, because the thing that comes to my mind when I look at this spell is Bigby's Hand, which is a 5th level spell that can push people around. It can restrain them. It can grab them, not restrain them. So is this spell might actually be more powerful than Bigby's Hand, which is a 5th level spell. And Bigby's Hand
Mm.
requires the caster to use a bonus action to interact with it. So
Mm.
this spell might have to be a higher level than what it is. But one of the things with Bigby's Hand is that you can move the hand from target to target, whereas with this spell you can't. So the damage might need to be looked at. It might require some interaction from the caster, like as the caster using an action or a bonus action to control the hands, and maybe bump it to a 4th level spell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Overall, though, just to sing praises one last time, the name, Appo's Interfering Appendages, is gold, and
Yeah.
your description is gold. And I
Yeah.
think you have something really, really fun here.
Yeah. I I really do like it. And I think just it's one of those spells that just the concept is crystal clear just from the name and the one sentence description, and just play test it a bit and iterate it, and those are the levers that you can pull in playtesting to figure out exactly how to make this sing.
Cool. Our next spell is this one's a little bit wordy, so I'm going to try to read a bit of it here. Are we putting the spells on screen for everybody?
Yes, we are.
Okay, good, great. So this is Summon Servitor by Zach W. Summon Servitor is a 3rd level conjuration with a casting time of 1 minute, a range of 10 feet, verbal, somatic, and material components. The material component is a figurine depicting the servitor worth at least 1 silver piece. Duration is instantaneous. You call forth a constructed spirit to act as a servitor, or to act as a servant. It manifests in an unoccupied space that you can see within range. This corporeal form uses the servitor stat block. When you cast a spell, choose laborer, scholar, or spy. Your choice determines certain traits in the creature's stat block. The creature resembles the figurine used as the material component for the spell, and it is either medium or small. The creature disappears when it drops to 0 hit points. Monty, do you want to take it from there?
You can use a bonus action to command the creature that you made with this. The stat block is over there, and so I think that and then it's under your control for 24 hours, after which it becomes inert. Or no, it just stops obeying any commands you've given it. It becomes its own free-willed creature. But then you can cast the spell again to maintain control. So the servitor has an armor class of 13, 22 hit points, a speed of 30 feet. It potentially has a bunch of skills. It's intelligent, very intelligent. It has an intelligence of 14. It understands the languages that you speak, but it doesn't speak. It's immune to poison, charm, frighten, and exhaustion. It can attack. Yeah, it has ranged attacks and melee attacks, and it potentially casts spells.
The scholar has, decent ranged spell attack, and
So this spell is doing a lot of things because it reminds me of Animate Dead. It reminds me of Tiny Servant. It reminds me of a bunch of different spells. But basically, this is a 3rd level spell that is summoning a very, very competent construct that can serve you in combat. But it has a casting time of 1 minute, so you have to do this before battle. So it very much feels like, um, building, like you are building a machine to help you out, and these machines um, are definitely better than what you get from Animate Dead. Like
Yeah,
a
and
hundred, yeah.
that's the tricky part. Is I first of all, I love this spell. I think that it's great for an artificer who doesn't. It's the artificer being allowed to do what the necromancer does, by building a little army of tiny robots that can walk around. And like the idea, if you're a DM and you're using this to have an artificer with his workshop run by tiny machines, that's really fun. If you're a player, having a few tiny machines to come with you into battle is really cool. It makes you feel like the technomancer, which is cool. Actually, now I want to make a subclass called the technomancer. But anyway,
this is the challenge with the spell, right? Is we've got a lot of things to think about with this.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is because the stat block here is like, I like the idea of having a construct that follows you around, but I think that the discussion point that I want to bring with this spell in particular is this a class feature disguised as a spell?
So, I mean, already I'm thinking that there could be an entire artificer subclass that is the technomancer, that is about creating
But that's the
robot.
battlesmith.
Well,
That
the battlesmith creates one. I like the idea of creating. I like this idea of creating multiple
right,
minions.
right.
I think the thing that worries me about this spell is there is a lot going on. It's kind of borrowing patchwork samples of what a lot of other summoning spells are doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually wonder if this would just be more straightforward and appropriate if it kind of just matched the skeleton or zombie stat block, but made it a little bit more mechanical and maybe gave it a couple more mechanical features, made it more intelligent and less combat focused. If you take the laborer, you get mold earth and there's prestidigitation for scholar, message for spy, comprehend languages for scholar, disguise self for spy. There's a lot of things that make this pretty powerful, and you can have multiple of them. You could have 3 or 4 of these things on your team. And if they have decent enough attacks, now they are only AC 13, hit points 22. So there we match the zombie skeleton spectrum. But yeah, I'm wondering if these constructs are a little too potent. But I'm not sure. I don't know. Where are you at with that?
I think that if you want to keep the constructs as they're written, this needs to be a 4th or perhaps even a 5th level spell. And yeah, I mean, I think that it's just one of those things where where Zach didn't specify which characters were going to get this spell.
Right.
It's a 3rd level conjuration, and it would be fine if it was an artificer spell, and an artificer spell only. I think it could be problematic if wizards could access it, potentially, because then as a wizard you could have your servitors, you could have your familiar, you could have your homunculus, you could then cast summon construct. Like there's a lot of ways to get a lot of bodies on the board. And I think that the challenge here. Oh, it does say artificer, bard. I missed it at the bottom. So we're giving it to the artificer, the bard, the cleric, the druid, the warlock, the wizard. Yeah. Oh. Ooh.
When I read this, I imagine it for the artificer, and that's really I mean, like, I get putting it on other classes. It feels like it's an artificer spell more than anything.
Yeah.
But that's just flavor wise. Like, you could flavor. I can't imagine a druid wanting. Although I guess it doesn't specify that they're made of metal. It could be a wooden
It,
construct,
it could be. It could be. I also wonder if it's got to be more expensive to make one,
right?
right? Like if the like if instead of you have to make the body of the creature, and like the creature's body costs like not one silver piece but costs like 100 gold or 500 gold or something like that, and it's a little bit more expensive to make one of these things, in the same way that like create homunculus.
Mm-hmm.
Like again, I compare the spell to create homunculus, which is a 6th level spell, and you're only allowed to have one homunculus at the same time. And that one you have to have a jeweled dagger worth 1,000 gold pieces, right? So I think that this one occupies a little bit of a strange niche, especially given how intelligent. Because like I think that's the thing with with Animate Dead, is that Animate Dead, there's clear limits to the versatility of what undead creatures can do, right? Because they don't have a high intelligence score. But this thing
Yeah.
has an intelligence of 14.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really competent, right? At doing complex tasks potentially. So
That
yeah.
is actually one thing that I like about it, and I almost feel like it should be a more intelligent summon, but maybe less potential in combat. I think that that might be a cool direction because being able to build a machine that can help you process information is really cool. Having them have like good intelligence scores could be really helpful, and then having them be useful on the battlefield is pretty cool. But yeah, it's tricky. There's a lot to unpack here,
Hmm.
and I generally like the overall concept and where we're going with this.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how it plays in actual play. I feel like it potentially is too powerful. Also, Zach W, I want to question the classes that this is available to. Um, I really feel like Artificer, yes. Druid, I can see a case for because we could have these made out of wood. Warlock, Cleric, and Bard, I don't know. I would actually put Sorcerer on here instead of those three. Clockwork Soul Sorcerer would be right at home with making
Yeah.
clockwork automatons. Warlock doesn't feel like it had. Like maybe I'm just not being imaginative enough, but Wizard, I'm in the middle on. Artificer is a definite yes, and I've made the case for Druid because now I'm imagining little wooden creatures that is
Yeah.
kind of fun for me. Um, but but yeah, I think that if I was making the spell list, I would have done Artificer, Sorcerer, Wizard.
Yeah, I do wonder about that idea of like making it a very explicitly non-combat servitor, right? Like that it doesn't have effective attacks, but that it really focuses on being like a lookout, a spy, someone that can help you with tasks. Like in that respect, it's like a super unseen servant. But then it does again, like we I think the challenge with the spell ultimately is that we've got Find Familiar, we've got Unseen Servant, we've got Tiny Servant, we've got Create Homunculus, we got Animate Dead, and we got all the other new Tasha's summon spells. And so this is another spell that is occupying that same design space, and and the and it's available to the classes that have all those spells at the same time. So we can end up with characters that have a lot of creatures alongside them. So I think that the core question with this one is, what's the fantasy? Is the fantasy here to have an army of killer robots, or is the fantasy here to have um a little robo buddy that helps you out? And I think if we go back to that fantasy, that might inform a little bit more what we do with the spell going forward.
Yeah. Um, I think that it has potential to be a really
Yeah,
cool spell.
yeah,
And Zach W, thank you for submitting it. I really like it on an artificer.
me
It
too. Yeah,
it's making a really cool case for. I just like. I want the one thing that the artificer didn't give me was a way to have an army of robots. Although there are ways to do it, but it requires quite a bit of work to get there. This is kind of filling that fantasy, so I totally get it on the artificer. It's filling a fantasy that I want. I want my artificer to have robots helping him in his workshop all the time. That's what I imagine an artificer does. They have automatons wandering around their workshop doing mundane tasks.
well, there's also like the Tony Stark building like the army of Ultron robots, right? Like the drones and everything like that. Like I really like that fantasy of like having them. Oh, now I wish they could fly and do like project like
Okay, now we're just let's make the spell called just Stark Enterprises.
Stark Industries. Yeah,
Stark
yeah.
Industries. No, we're getting no. Let's write a completely new spell. No, it's good
Yeah,
job, Zach W. Love
yeah.
it. Thank you. Okay,
You want to introduce this one?
yes, I do.
Okay.
Um, this next spell, I doesn't have an official title. It looks like it might have multiple titles. I've gone fuzzy. We're gonna unfuzzy me. There we go.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
wait,
Yeah,
where am I?
you're all good.
Okay. Um, this spell is called Welcome to Thunderdome, or more seriously, Mind Duel or something. Um,
By Hot to
by, by
Trotsky.
Hut to Trotsky. This is a fourth level spell, conjuration, casting time of one action, range of 120 feet, verbal, somatic, and material components. I love this as well. The material component is a fancy velvet glove to throw down worth 50 gold pieces. Which is definitely the I challenge you to a duel glove, and a piece of steel thread or fishing line, which the spell consumes. Concentration up to 5 minutes. The target must succeed on a wisdom saving throw equal to your spell save DC. On a failed save, you shunt both yourself and the creature into a demi-plane arena of your own imagination. You create your own symmetrical battle arena a la Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion, making a 50-foot cube, but the arena must be symmetrical so that you and the other creature begin identical mirrored starting locations no closer than 30 feet apart. The arena may feature non-magical terrain, fortifications, and weather effects, including areas of difficult terrain, but no falls or height differentials between two adjacent squares of more than 10 feet. When the spell ends, both of you are deposited back to your original locations when the spell was cast. If either you or the target are reduced to 0 hit points, the spell ends immediately and both of you are deposited back into your original plane or location. It's available for bards, clerics, druids, paladins, sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards. Um, I, it's um, this spell's wild. I love I love the idea of it. It's compelled duel dialed up to 11.
Well, it's compelled duel and banishment at the same time, right? Because you're compelling a duel and removing yourself and another target from the fight, right?
Yeah,
Um,
it's a little intense. I don't know if fourth level is high enough for how intense this spell is. I love the idea of Thunderdome. I mean,
yes,
classic.
yeah,
Uh, And I love the idea that you're throwing down an I challenge you to a duel glove and you and the target just disappear into an arena to battle it out. The few questions I have, first of all, some of the wording needs a bit of work here.
Yeah.
That's not really something I'm going to get into the nitty gritty of, but could use a once over on the wording of the spell.
Oh, Callum S that said this is also the mirror dimension spell
Right.
from Doctor Strange. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, I think flat out this is a 6th level spell.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like yeah. It's got to be because this is the type of spell that as a dungeon master, I'm cool with the players using this once per day. But if you start like as a 4th level spell, like potentially the players can start throwing this down in every combat, and this is not an every combat spell.
A few people in chat have already mentioned another one of the interesting aspects of this spell that I want to bring up, which is it requiring concentration. The fact that you get shunted into your own arena. Now, as a spellcaster, oftentimes the last place I want to be is in an arena with a single enemy trying to kill me while I'm concentrating on a
Yeah,
spell.
yeah.
Now, this might raise the intensity of the spell even past 6th level, but one of my thoughts was what if you could choose 2 targets to shunt, so you could choose the barbarian and an enemy to shunt into an arena. Then that's a whole different ball game.
I just think if it's a 6th level spell that lasts for 1 minute, it doesn't need concentration anymore. Straight up. Like you're assuming enough of a risk by getting into this little battle arena. The other thing that I would do with this one is I would just make a map for it. I would just have the spell come with a map that says this is the battle arena. That way it's less prone to the player like doing something. Or
Then my counterpoint. Okay, I know you have something.
okay, you do your counterpoint, but I got the idea.
I do like the idea of being able to flavor the arena to benefit the caster, because that is the point, is that the caster is putting themselves in a tricky situation. If you're a sorcerer or a wizard, putting yourself in an arena against an opponent, if you can make the arena in such a fashion that benefits you and the spells you have at your disposal, you want the home team advantage.
What if we just go to the Doctor Strange fantasy? What if it's full on mirror dimension? What if it is just the bounds of a 100-foot radius, but it's like you take whatever area you are in and you're making a copy of it that only you and the target exist in. So that way there's no need for another map. You're literally just in a parallel reality with just you and the target. And that way there's no map needed. Like it's very easy to run and play because you're just using whatever area, but you could still be a little strategic with it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, that could be cool. I do I editorial notes, compelled dual taunt, also a villain's way to trap a particular player character, which I think both of those are really cool ideas, and I see the intent here. It's it definitely needs to be a higher level.
Yeah.
I do worry about putting myself in an arena with a target. You need to be very choosy on your targets. You could get yourself into a lot of trouble with this spell, which is fun.
I don't know. I think okay. I feel like as a spellcaster,
Yeah.
if you are taking an enemy out of the fight for 1 minute and it's just you and me 1 minute, and I can bring whatever spell I want to the table, no concentration required. Like, quite literally, the simplest thing that you could do with this spell is Thunderdome them and then turn yourself invisible. Right?
You know, okay,
and what if the spell had no saving throw as well? Like what if we get rid of the saving throw, we make it 6th level, we make it automatic. So you and the target thunderdomed, mirror dimensioned, no save for you or the target. You're both in there for 1 minute. Um and
Still with concentration or no?
no. I think
So
yeah,
here's
cuz
something that I want to bring up. A little personal story, Monty. You're going to remember this. I was playing a wizard. Our friend Josh was playing a barbarian. We were 17th level, and every day Josh would argue with me and be like, "Listen, I'm playing a barbarian. You're just a lowly wizard. Like, you're so squishy. My character could kick your character's butt." And he said it every day. And I was like, dude, you couldn't. Like, I'm a level 17 wizard. You have no idea how powerful I am. And finally, this got to the point where Monty was like, you know what, guys? I think it was a night that Josh and I were the only two that showed up for D&D. And you were like, all right, you guys, we're going to do PvP. Let's settle this once and for all. And I knocked him out in like 3 rounds. I destroyed him as a level 17 wizard, and he thought his barbarian was so tough, but like, you can't mess with me when I think I cast invisibility first round, and then I dropped like my power word kill or something. I don't know. I did some mean stuff to him.
Mhm.
Um, and it was a lot of fun, but it also proved that in a one-on-one arena, a spellcaster who has, especially if we remove concentration and make this a higher level spell, that means that I can pop into the arena with my arsenal of spells, having another spell to concentrate on. It it really makes it interesting, and I actually think higher level, when you are casting 6th and 7th level spells, um, then yeah, your
Yeah.
spellcaster is going to be one of the most powerful things in the game. And when you're taking a monster as well, chances are that you're going to fare pretty well against most monsters. I probably wouldn't pick the BBEG, but if there's like a dumb meat shield or something that you can
Yeah.
take out of the fight and cast mental prison on them after you cast this, like, I don't know, cast
Yeah.
hypnotic pattern on it, and then just cast hold monster on it, and then beat the heck out of it. I don't know. There's so many options when you're a high level spellcaster.
There are, like you could even just like try to survive for 1 minute and take them out if you wanted to, right? Like remove the threat. Um yeah, you know, the I really like it being the more think about this spell as the mirror dimension, the more I like it. Because like I'm just thinking of that moment from Infinity War when Doctor Strange tries to mirror dimension Thanos, and Thanos uses the Reality Stone to basically counterspell the mirror
Yeah.
dimension spell. And it's just interesting because as the wizard, there's so many like interesting narrative times where you're like, oh man, this creature is a huge threat to, like, imagine using the spell in a fight where there's a risk of collateral damage. So you use it against the target that's going to cause the collateral damage, solving that scenario, but now you have to go toe to toe with that creature, right?
Also, a lot of people in chat mentioning the Hexblade Warlock, which, yeah, Hexblade or Blade Singer.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, you
yeah,
want you
yeah,
want to go toe to toe with your opponent. It's so fun. Uh, oh man, the Hexblade. It just seems so cool to point at somebody and be like, "You and me, let's go."
yeah.
Like, yeah, it's cool. Um, so yeah, I do think so. I love the idea of this spell. I think it needs some finessing in its wording, and I
Yeah.
think we might want to play with the level of the spell. And I would playtest what happens if we up the level and remove concentration, because I
Hmm.
think we want the spellcaster to have the upper hand, not too much, but we want them to have the upper hand. And allowing them to hop into the Thunderdome and then cast another concentration spell, I think is the upper hand that they need.
Well, and that's, you know what the interesting downside of the spell is that
What?
this spell has a casting time of 1 action. So you cast the spell, and then your opponent they're gonna get to act before you get to act again.
Yeah.
Because locking them in there with you're giving them the advantage to do something against you first, right?
You know,
So
somebody else just brought up polymorph, and I'm now just imagining if I can concentrate on polymorph, jumping into the Thunderdome and turning into a T-Rex. We've got Big Linda all over again. But
yeah.
yeah. That is an interesting play because although your concentration gets
Mm-hmm.
a little, but that's why we removed concentration. And yeah,
Yeah. I think you have to remove concentration to make the spell work, because it just kind of sucks if the spellcaster casts the spell, then fails the concentration check and it's over. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta kind of like, you gotta, mm, and I don't know, is concentrating while you're in there too OP? Like I guess my question is if you're gonna cast the spell on a target only to banish them or polymorph them into a snail, why? Like, why didn't you just polymorph them into a snail and save your 6th level spell slot? You know what I mean? Like, there's certain things where even though you can concentrate inside this mirror dimension, um you could do that anyways. You would just have everyone else on the battlefield with you. You know what I mean?
yeah. Now,
Right?
people are bringing up more interesting things in chat here where it does say that you could build fortifications. So if I build the Thunderdome and I have a 10-foot high, maybe 10 feet isn't that high. Nothing can be
Yeah, no.
higher than 10 feet, but I could put me in a cubicle, like a little cubed cell with barred windows and just shoot fireballs out of my...
That's why letting the caster choose the terrain is like, if you can design the terrain of the arena, it's also too much of a like, well, now we have to stop while Monty design. Like, imagine me casting the spell and now
Right.
right, like
Monty's a tactical gamer,
yes,
and
yeah,
he would analyze every fortification and where the difficult terrain is to best suit his needs. And we
yeah,
would be pausing our D&D game for probably an hour while Monty sets up his arena. So yeah, that's another major thing to consider is most spellcasters are going to want the upper hand. So then the question becomes, what is the best possible layout that I can make? And it might change from time to time. So every time that I cast this spell, how long are we going to take setting up the Thunderdome? And does that bog down
yeah.
play?
So if you want to have the variable terrain, I think that the maps, like, the spell either has to say choose one of these maps, or like it's a featureless room, or it's the current area. Yeah, it's tricky to include that.
Yeah. Now, you know, there is the whenever I want to truly test my skills in Smash Bros, you choose the final map, the one that's just like a flat
Final
surface.
destination. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No items. Final destination.
Yeah, let's see. Let's see. But at the same time again, I would want my concentration available if I'm in a flat surface with
What if
nothing else.
what if the spell? Okay, did you ever know about the spell? I can't pronounce it. Shahrazad. It was a Magic the Gathering card,
Oh boy.
way back in the day, called Shahara. Like, I think it was called like Shahrazad or something like that. Someone in chat's gonna know what I mean. So this card in Magic, when you played it, you put the game aside and you played a sub game of Magic, and whoever won the sub game took damage.
Or whoever lost or whoever
Whoever
won.
lost, whoever
Yeah.
lost the sub game, right? And then you went back to the real game that you were playing. And so what you could say with this spell is that the creature reduced to 0 hit points during the duel doesn't die, but instead takes a bunch of damage.
Yeah.
Yeah. That could be another interesting way to modify this spell. Or maybe that actually the damage that you take while in the duel isn't real at all. And it's just a like, let's throw down for 1 minute, and then yeah. Like, so that could be another alternative take on this.
Yeah. I it's funny that the more that we discuss this spell, the more I see possible problems happening at the table.
Yeah.
I do so again, we picked it because there was a lot of fun discussion, and I think the idea of the Thunderdome duel
Yeah.
is really, really cool. And I like the idea of you and the target just getting put into an arena and having to battle it out. But I want to highlight how careful we need to be with bogging down play and what the stakes are and what is going to make this spell really work. And I think that there is a few tweaks and alterations that we could do to make this spell have a better presence in game.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So next up, Sandro has a spell called Magnetic Field. Um, it is a 4th level transmutation. Um, Casting time 1 action, range 90 feet. You create a point you choose within range on a surface. You have to have verbal somatic material and some magnetite encased in mithril. You concentrate on it, and artificers, sorcerers, and wizards get this. On the point that you cast the spell, a small-sized orb appears. The orb has 30 hit points and an armor class of 20. It's immune to psychic poison and non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, and remains for the duration of the spell. The spell ends early if the orb is reduced to 0 hit points. When within a 30-foot radius of the orb, all metal objects are pulled towards it the moment the spell is cast, even if they are behind full cover. If there's full cover that is stuck in place between the orb and the object clings to it the same way it would against the orb. Any object that is affected by the spell can be pulled loose with a strength check against the spell save DC. If a metal object is being held like a weapon, whoever holds the object must make a strength saving throw. On a failure, the object is immediately pulled from the hand of the one holding it and is stuck against it. On a success, all attack rolls or ability checks made with the weapon are made with disadvantage, so long as the creature holding it is within the radius of the spell. If a creature makes a ranged weapon attack with a piece of ammunition that has metal in it, the ammunition is immediately drawn to the orb if it goes through its radius. If a metal object is being worn within the area when the spell is being cast, or a creature wearing it starts its turn there, whoever wears it must make a strength saving throw and be pulled towards the orb, taking 1d6 bludgeoning damage for every 10 feet they are dragged along the surface. And the creature is restrained. On a success, their speed is halved if they try to move away from the orb. A creature that has failed their saving throw can use their action to remove themselves from it, making a strength check which removes this restrained condition. Creatures that are huge or larger make all saving throws and checks with advantage against the spell, I guess.
Yeah. Right away, this spell seems super fun. I love the idea of the magnetism. I love how it appropriately messes with the right things. I am wondering if there's potential to shave the text down. It feels like a lot of things to remember in the game.
Yeah.
You
know what I think would be cool? This is just me being weird. What if you chose a metal object to make the center of the magnetic field?
So instead of creating an orb, you're like,
I was thinking I was thinking of heat metal, right? Like the heat metal spell, how you have to choose a metal object to heat up. And what if this spell was you chose a metal object to make the source of the magnetism? I like the spell a lot. Yeah, I like this. I just think that the wording needs to get cleaned up a lot.
yeah. Do you think it's a good fourth level spell, or do you think it's higher?
I think that you can make it a fourth level spell by fixing the wording.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, Things that I love about this spell, the one thing that actually stands out to me the most, which is probably not the coolest thing here, but for some reason, when I read about the ammunition with metal and it being drawn to it, I love the idea of throwing this orb in front of your party when you're dealing with a bunch of ranged attackers. And now it's basically like attracting all of the arrows and bolts
Yeah.
into it. And I actually really like it as a defensive option
I mean,
for
there
that.
like Wind Wall is a third level spell that just knocks out all ranged attacks through it. So it's not unprecedented to have a spell that impacts these things. This spell is also interesting because like it only works against metal creatures, and it could backfire against your own party members as well
Yeah.
because of the use of metal. Like I can think of a lot of encounters that I've run even recently where it's like, yeah, a dragon doesn't care, an elemental doesn't care, yeah, animated armor get wrecked, but but
That's the thing is like when you take heat metal, there's actually a lot of combat encounters that I've had heat metal in that I'm like, oh, what do I do? Can't use this really cool spell. You're always waiting for the moment. So like, yes, when you're fighting a courtyard of paladins, this spell will wreck them.
mm,
But when you're fighting a dragon, this spell is going to, you know what this spell will do with a dragon? It's a great way to accumulate their hoard. You throw it down and get all the gold pieces over to you and steal
mhm.
their hoard.
Yeah, yeah, heat metal can break an encounter, of course it can, and like all spells will have a circumstance where they break an encounter. That's kind of the design of fifth edition spells, where it's like when you use them in their perfect conditions, they are kind of encounter ending. That's just kind of the way that they are. Um, so with this spell, it potentially disarms a lot of targets. If you're fighting enemies, like it can disarm them and it can pull them together into one area. Um, which seems for to me that seems fine for a fourth level spell. Like honestly, because like when we think about it, a third level spell could incapacitate them all. We Evard's Black Tentacles is can restrain them and hold them in place as well. So I think we're pretty close. Like I just wonder if maybe we need to be like, if the object is being held, the target can either choose to let go of the metal object, or they can make a saving throw. On a success, they don't have disadvantage. On a failure, they do. Right? Like you could dial this back by saying like someone's not gonna it's not gonna rip things out of people's hands. We could also say like it's not gonna pull them all the way towards the center right away. We could dial it back a little bit.
People in chat, I hear you on the fact that not all metals are magnetic. And according to the wording of this spell, it just says metal objects. And that's how I'm going to run it. In my fantasy world, I'm not a scientist. I don't have time to care about which metals are more magnetic than others.
Mm.
It attracts gold in my world. I'm rolling that gold ball home.
Yeah, and I guess the only other thing that you really have to address with the spell is how much damage do objects flying through the area cause, if any. Um, right? So like
If
they can
if a
take.
monster wearing armor gets drawn into the orb, and then a bunch of people's swords get drawn out of their hands and fly towards the orb as well, is there a chance that the target who's stuck to the orb gets hit with like 40 swords?
I think that if you want the spell to work that way, it's a very different spell,
Yeah, yeah.
right? If you don't want the spell to do that work that way, um, uh, I think that you could just use some discretion with it. I think it's really close. I really actually do think it's fine for a fourth level spell, and I just think that it needs cleaner wording. And I'm trying to think of another spell that does something similar. Like I'm like there's some sort of vortex spell like Maelstrom that like it pulls targets towards the center of it and does damage to them. And I'm wondering if you could grab some wording from that, but what the name of the spell is escaping me right now. Like, there's other spells because like,
Gravity well?
is it Gravity Well? Is it one of the
You
gravity?
used it with your
Yeah,
Clockwork Soul
I feel like I did.
in the Pale Man chapter. I think you used it to like pull a
Yeah.
bunch of people in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. And like if it's just pulling objects in towards the center, right? And because I think that the orb is immobile by the description of the spell. Like once you create the orb, it's staying there,
Yeah.
right?
Gravity sinkhole?
It might be, right? Because that's another notable thing about this is that, and maybe another reason why to not make it target an object in the area is that when you make this spell like have to be a point within range that is it's like fixed in, then it really makes it very close, really, to like a weirdly flavored Evard's Black Tentacles slash like standard battlefield control sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like where this spell is going. I think it needs to be cleaned up a bit and just double checked on the potential of one of the hardest things about designing spells in D&D, and Monty and I just finished designing over 40 spells for our new book, and I will say that the hardest part, in my opinion, is every time you create a spell, when you show it to somebody else and they go, but what if I, and come up with
Yeah.
about 10 scenarios that are gaps that your spell didn't consider. And I think this is one of those spells that, like, it's really cool when you read it, but then you start being like, oh, but what about this, this, and the other thing? And there's a lot of potential confusing things that could happen at the table, or not even confusing, just unforeseen.
Yeah, I feel like with this spell, you don't actually need to have an object in the middle that can be damaged to end the spell. I feel like you can just have like actually it could just be an object that you like there could just be a focus component to the spell, like a ball of iron, and you people are gonna get mad at me for how I pronounce iron.
I
The
think you pronounce iron beautifully.
whatever. It could just be a metal ball, and you fling that metal ball out into space, and things are attracted to it, and you don't worry about it being attacked and damaged for the duration of the spell. Right? I think the spell is actually fine at fourth level if you clean the wording up to make it very clear that it doesn't do damage.
Yeah. Now,
Right?
somebody also did bring up in chat, though, something else that's pretty crazy is the point in which you cast the spell doesn't say it needs to be on a surface. So if you cast this spell and the orb appears over a cliff or over a pool of lava, and it starts pulling enemies into the lava or over the edge of a cliff, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. I mean, but there's a ton of spells at fourth and fifth level that can push people off cliffs and knock them into lava.
Okay, fine.
Right? Like I'm not super worried about that because I feel like yeah, like I just go immediately sure, I can do that with Thunderwave or Bigby's hand or telekinesis, right? Like I can just like start flicking people into objects. Like there's a lot of ways to do that. So I think that that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I would like to see this spell play tested
Yeah.
and refined, but generally, Sandro, I think you got something really cool.
Yeah, I agree.
Moving on to Transposing Tether by Natemare 117. This is a fourth level conjuration, casting time 1 bonus action, range of self. Verbal somatic material components. The material component is a weapon worth at least 1 silver piece. Concentration up to 1 minute. The next time you hit a creature with a weapon attack before the spell ends, you and the creature become linked with a magical tether that only you can see. For the next minute, you can use your reaction to swap places with this creature as long as they are within 60 feet of you. Additionally, you can also use your reaction to swap places with your linked target when you are the target of an attack roll, you are the target of an area of effect that requires a save, or when you're about to be harmed by an environmental hazard. The tethered creature will take your place, forcing them to become the new target of the attack roll, target of the area effect, or target of the environmental hazard. You cannot swap places with this creature if you are in a space smaller than than their size would allow them to fit. And if the creature dies before the spell ends, the next creature you hit with a weapon attack becomes tethered with you. At the end of each of its turns, the creature must make a charisma saving throw against your spell's save DC. On a success, the link is severed, and you are no longer tethered to the creature. On a failure, the link remains. Available for bards, rangers, sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards. Also, they listed Arcane Trickster, Rogue, and Eldritch Knight Fighter.
I like this spell. I love this spell. One thing right off the bat, I think that for the next minute you can use. I think maybe this is just me guessing. I think that the author might have meant action, not reaction here. Right? I think that it's supposed to be for the next minute you can use your action to manually swap places, and then you can use your reaction to dynamically swap places. But if I'm incorrect on that, please let me know, Nate Mayer 117, because I feel like the reason why I say that is that reactions always have to have a trigger, and this or maybe because just the wording that they used here was for the next minute you can use your action to swap places with this creature as long as they're within 60 feet of you. Additionally, you can use your reaction to swap places. So I feel like, am I wrong here?
Can you not use a reaction?
A reaction has to have a trigger. A reaction always.
Well, I mean, Misty Step is
Mis-
a reaction.
No, it's not. Misty Step is a bonus action.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
Nathan's here in the chat. No, I meant reaction. So as worded, then Nathan, then this line of text does nothing, because a reaction has to have a trigger.
Yeah, I guess most reaction spells are in like it's a reaction to something that occurs. It's not just an open.
Yeah, so you need so basically you either this
It either needs to be a bonus action or an action.
Yeah. I think it would be fine if you could do this, right? Okay, on the effect activation being okay, I'm actually reading. Yeah, I think that yeah, that's okay. Like, it's just that if you want to be able to just swap anytime you want, it should be as an action.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
What about a bonus action? Is that because it's a bonus action to cast the spell? Because then you cast it on your sword and then hit people with it.
I think it's too good for a 4th level spell if you can then swap places with them as a bonus action on subsequent turns, but you could playtest that.
Now here's the next question. If you use your action to swap, then can you also use your reaction to swap again?
Yeah. Which creates an interesting thing of like you putting yourself, because then what you could do is you could move yourself into danger.
So you swap places with the enemy to get into a better position to get hurt. Then like the enemy's standing next to a pit of lava. You swap places with them and then dive into the pit of lava and then swap places with them again. I don't know. There's a lot of shenanigans. I feel bad for whoever you get with this. Now, my other question,
like if what you could say is for the next minute, anytime the creature moves, or like for the next minute at the start of each of the creature's turns, you can use your reaction to swap places with them. That's what you could say there. If you want to be able to swap with them, like if you want that dynamism there, it just needs to. You need like for this line, it just needs to have that trigger there.
I'm also wondering about this section here. At the end of each of its turns, the creature must make a charisma saving throw against your spell safety DC. On a success, the link is severed and you are no longer tethered to the creature. But when we look at this section here, if the creature dies before the spell ends, the next creature you hit with a weapon attack becomes tethered with you. If they succeed on their saving throw, should it say in here either A, that the link is severed and the spell ends, or is the link severed and you can now hit a new target to create a new link?
I think the
spell ends.
I think the spell ends, and I think if the creature dies, the spell ends. One of the things that I would actually say is, I would say that each time you and the creature swap places, it can make a charisma saving throw.
You know, there is also the argument that I would actually be okay if this spell just got rid of this section that you have highlighted. Like, rather than for the next minute, you can use your action or bonus action or whatever to swap places. If it was just you can use your reaction for the next minute to swap places with the linked target whenever you're about to take damage. Is that's what I wouldn't.
The reason why I want to be able to do as an action is because, okay, imagine doing this. Imagine being in a room where there is a pit trap, or being in a room where there is like a 1,000-ton block that's going to drop down, and you walk yourself into the blast zone, then use your action to swap places with them, and then use your free object interaction to pull the switch.
This is, oh man. Now, okay. So if you're in like a Dr. Evil scenario and Dr. Evil has you hanging over the shark tank and pulls the lever, or like is about to pull the lever to drop you into the shark tank, you can just swap places and then pull the lever.
Yeah, or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. That would be kind of fun. I do think that it would be cool though instead of at the end of each of the target's turns, it's each time you swap places with the target, because you're only able to swap places with the target once per turn anyways. So that way you get this kind of cool thing of like, that way you're never going to waste it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where if for some reason you tether with a target and the trigger doesn't happen for a turn, for whatever reason, then that way it's still in effect.
Right.
Yeah. Right. I feel like there's a lot of people in chat saying, I wish there was a spell that did this for my allies, and I feel like there is one.
I mean, like not for swapping your place with them, but I really like, what the heck's that spell that I love that I took on my Artificer on the stick?
Vortex Warp.
Vortex Warp.
Yeah, but I feel like there is one that, you know, it might be the Peace Domain Cleric. Doesn't the Peace Domain Cleric have like something stupidly overpowered that it works kind of like this? I don't know. Or the Conjuration Wizard feature that the author Nate actually just said. It's the Conjuration Wizard feature. Yeah.
Yeah. Either way, Nate, this spell just got me. It made me happy. I liked reading it. It was fun.
I really like this spell, and I think that I would just clean up a couple of those elements and try playtesting it and see what kind of shenanigans happen, and it's going to be awesome shenanigans. But I like it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Moving on. This one is a bit of a bigger spell here. This is Pewter's Tactical Transmogrification by Earl P. So this is a second level transmutation spell that can be cast as a bonus action, range of touch. Components are somatic only, and it lasts up to a minute, concentration required. Um, Forming two signs with their hands, the caster reaches out to an ally or taps themselves on the chest, transforming the subject into a longsword, a spear, or even a humble chair. You touch a willing creature and transform them into a medium, mundane object of your choice, during which they count as an object for spells and magical effects targeting them. Well, in this new form, they can see and hear the area they're in as if they had all their normal senses, but they cannot speak, take any actions, bonus actions, or reactions. However, they can end the transformation at any time, no reaction required. A creature transformed in this way has a number of hit points and AC determined by its size, but fails all strength and dexterity saves automatically. If worn or carried, the holder of such an object makes dexterity saves on their behalf instead, but does not benefit from features that have such damage on success. The creature transformed in this way is only hit by an attack if they are targeted directly. When you cast a spell at third level, you can choose to transform the willing creature into a small object instead, and the duration increases to 10 minutes. Additionally, when you cast this at as a fourth level spell, you can choose to transform the willing creature into a large object, and the duration increases to 1 hour. Finally, when cast with a fifth level slot, you can choose to transform the willing creature into a tiny object, and the duration increases to 8 hours. Interesting.
And
Um,
Earl's design notes say, I made this spell for my ranger, who I wanted to have the ability to turn an ally into a throwing weapon and launch them into the fray. I can definitely see this being on the artificer list.
the first thing that I imagined, I'm drawing a blank on the game because I don't play a lot of Call of Duty or those types of games, but I've seen videos online of a game mode where certain players are mundane objects and have to hide in the environment, and other people are running around with guns trying to find out which mundane objects. Like a person is a barrel and like tries to go next to the other barrels and hang out there hoping not to get discovered, and then the other people with guns are running around trying to shoot them. And I just love watching the videos where the barrel's moving around and then it sees somebody coming and tries not to move. And I imagine that this is a hilarious way. My first thought isn't turning into a throwing knife and throwing them into the fray. My first thought is that if I'm a rogue and I need to spy on somebody, you turn me into a chair, put me in the room, and I can hear the whole conversation that's about to happen. Um, yeah, I do like that with upcasting, the concentration gets longer because I need longer than a minute to eavesdrop. Um,
Well, also imagine casting this on a friend and turning them into a gold piece and then using that gold piece to pay somebody. But then like if it was a longer than a minute, you could use it in an interesting way, right? Where like you turn an ally into a gold piece, give that like then pay using the gold piece, and then your ally is now tailing the target as a gold piece. I don't know where I'm going with this, but like,
yeah, yeah. People are bringing up, I guess, Prop Hunt. Is Prop Hunt from, uh, what is it, Fortnite? Either way, a lot of fun. Um, but that's that. Now, okay, what notes do I have about this? I do wonder the section on upcasting. I get like I don't really have any complaints on what it does. I just feel like it kind of breaks tradition on the way that it's
well,
worded.
I guess okay. Here's where I'm
Oh, Call of Duty.
approaching this is like you're turning an ally into an object, right?
Yeah.
So and this is kind of, I think, the weird thing about it is that the author's intent with this spell is to turn an ally into a throwing weapon so you can throw that ally at an enemy, and then the ally turns back into themselves, so like you just moved them for you, right? So in that use case, this is basically like vortex warp with extra steps. You know what I mean? Like it, but it has all these extra restrictions around it, because like vortex warp, you can pick someone up and just teleport them there, but with this spell you have to be adjacent to somebody, but you're casting it as a bonus action, but now you're turning them into a thrown weapon. And now what happens if you miss with the attack with a thrown weapon? Like there, it adds all these like extra steps to like just the idea of like launching someone into battle, right?
It is interesting that the design intent lists that when that was the last thing I thought of doing
Yeah,
with this
yeah,
spell.
yeah.
I thought of like a million other things that I want to do with this spell. Really, for me, it's like, yeah, it's prop hunt. It's turning yourself into a cardboard box or a basket or whatever. Just something to like, oh no, I'm being chased by the guards. I turn a corner and turn myself into a potted plant, and now I'm just decoration, and nobody knows I'm there. I mean, really, then are you not just invisibility with more steps?
Well, it's kind of like, I think the interesting thing about this is it's polymorph as a lower level spell, but only into an inanimate object, right? And I think in this respect, here's one of the things that I would actually say to really simplify this spell. Okay, I would say that the target's game statistics, aside from its size, remain the same. So don't worry about the game statistics, whatever your statistics are. It's just that if the moment you take any damage, you turn back into your original form. Just that's what I would do with it. It's like your game statistics stay the same, your AC is the same, everything is the same about you in your transformed form. Maybe the only thing with it is that your AC becomes 15, right? So don't change the game stats, don't give the new hit points. Just the moment the transmogrified form takes any damage, it turns back into the original form of the creature. And that way you don't have to worry about all that. And then you still keep all the wording of like it keeps its normal senses. I would also say that I feel like it should have to the I do think that the creature should only be able to end the transformation at the like they could end it on their turn, right? Once they're transformed. You know what I mean? But maybe yeah. Like they can end the transformation not at any time. They can end the transformation at the start of their turn if they want to. That's the cleanup that I would do with it.
Yeah. I
And
really do like there's an example in here about turning your friend into an arrow and shooting them over the castle wall. Mind you, then you put your friend into a castle, an enemy castle by themselves, which is problematic. Unless they want to be there, then sure.
do I take damage if I'm a chair and someone sits on me? No, because the chair doesn't take damage when like unless
You
you.
don't know that my chair isn't in pain right now because I'm sitting on it. Have you asked my chair?
I would rule no, that a chair does
No,
not take
no.
damage from being sat on, right? So yeah, I would just be like, um,
Okay, things are happening now. People are saying stuff in chat that I'm like is blowing my mind. Like if I need to get somewhere, like up to the top of a wall, could I turn my friend into a ladder, climb the wall, and then pull the ladder up?
no, because I think that's one of the things with the spell is that it has to be a medium object, which actually I think by the wording of the spell it should be a small object. So like no, you can't turn someone into a ladder with this spell because the ladder's too big,
Right.
right?
Could I turn them into a rope?
Sure, sure. You can turn your friend into a rope with this spell, and then lasso. Aha!
Can I turn them into a grappling hook? Could I turn them into a door? Could I turn them into a boulder? could my friend jump off
Maybe.
a wall and then I turn them into a boulder and then they crush my enemies?
And Exocom brings up the valid point of when you transform back from a small object inside a cramped space, what happens? You get shunted to the closest available space, I would say. And for every 10 feet that you get shunted, you take 1d6 force damage. No, we're not going to have any sort of Ant-Man antics with this spell. We don't want to do that. Yeah. We want a very explicit. I would definitely have a no Ant-Man clause in this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or what is the superhero from The Boys that explode? Yeah, it's it's an awful scene. I think he's Termite. Yeah. That's a
That was a wake-up call in the first episode. I remembered what I was watching very quickly.
Yeah, if you know, you know.
Yeah. Oh, man. Anyway, brutal. Yeah,
I do like the idea of a second level spell that can just transform your allies into non-magical, like mundane objects.
I could turn my friends into oars.
Yeah, you could. Yeah. And the fact that they have to be willing means that this isn't... yeah.
It's not an attack spell. It's not polymorph used offensively. This is, you use this for stealth.
Yeah, and
subterfuge.
I think... yeah, I
utility.
think the casting time probably has to be in action. It probably has to be in action, if we're being fair. But then the duration could be up to an hour. Right? So that could work. I like this. I like the spell. I like the idea that you can just turn someone into a non-magical object.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now
would water be considered an object? Can you turn someone into water with this spell? I mean, as soon as you get... yes, but they're not gonna... the spell isn't gonna kill anybody. Like, we're gonna make sure that this isn't the spell. Yeah, right? Like,
can I turn my friend into dirt and mix the dirt together to make a new friend? What are we even doing now? What are we doing?
Can you turn your friend into a loaf of bread? Right? Like, I
wish.
Right.
I wish all my friends were bread. They'd be delicious. They do mention putting this on the Artificer spell list. They don't specify spell lists. They made it a bonus action because they wanted to be able to throw their ally. They use the game statistics from the animated object spell. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like it. I like it. So we got about 15 minutes left, and we haven't taken any questions from chat. So I feel like we should get some questions from chat in here, because we got through how many did we? Yeah, we got through like 7 or 8, 6 or 7. Yeah. So with the last 15 minutes that we have, Chad, if you got any questions for us about homebrew and spells or otherwise, let us know, because this is the workshop phase. I just want to say, I was astounded by the creativity of all the spells that were submitted, and I was very surprised because of the 40 spells that we got, I don't think a single one was like, here is a spell that is obviously a damage dealing spell. Like, you know what I mean?
There was a lot of utility control, which are more creative than damage dealing spells in most cases. And it was actually just really fun to see the creativity that people brought to this. If we didn't pick your spell today, it doesn't mean that we didn't love your spell. It just either meant that we thought it was great, or we didn't have time, or that we didn't have enough notes to talk about it, and it was maybe, I don't know, there was 40 of them. There was a lot. But we are going to be doing these more often, so if we didn't get to your spells, please keep submitting. We will try to not pick the same names over and over again. Monty, maybe we should start making a list of like people whose names we picked so that we don't do like, I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong if you did submit and we did pick yours and we're doing something different, please submit again. But also we won't pick the same person over and over and over again if they keep submitting. We'll try to divvy it up, pick different people, make sure that we're getting as many people involved in this as possible. Again, we get so many submissions, it's impossible for us to go over all of them in a 2-hour period. We like to chat, we like to dissect, and we like to discuss, and that's the fun of these
Yeah. Yeah.
these workshops.
Yeah. And so if we didn't pick your submission this time around, please don't be discouraged. We will do more homebrew workshops. It seems like a lot of people are clamoring for another low-level spell homebrew workshop. I think we're going to do high-level spells first, and then we might go back to then we might do subclasses, and then we'll come back to low-level spells. I think that sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
Right? We did feats.
And
Did we do feats? I think we did feats already.
did we do
Yeah.
feats? Was that what we did?
I know that we did monsters for sure. So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do agree. A few people remarked that several of the spells here were more mid-level than low level. So we might next time around say up to third level. To really bring it down a little bit, and see if we can focus more on the low level ones. But for the high level ones, I think we'll say give us 6 and up, and see where it goes.
If you are wondering about how to get us to review your homebrew, these homebrew workshops are part of our Patreon. So if you join us on Patreon, we're going to try to do these monthly or every other month at least. We're going to do more of them in the future. We kind of try to do some Q&As, but we also do these homebrew workshops. They are for our patrons. So if you are a patron, you can submit homebrew. We release topics. So if you are specifically looking, for example, in chat here, I see somebody asking about homebrew subclasses. We will probably do a subclass workshop at some point.
Mm-hmm.
We will be taking one submission from everybody, and we can't read everybody's when we do these. But joining our Patreon is the way to get us to review your homebrew stuff. We feel like that is a cool way to involve our patrons and allow them to have special access to our minds and our thoughts on their cool stuff. Also, if you do join our Patreon and enter our Discord, there are homebrew workshop sections in there. Monty and I are not as directly active as we would be for these, but our whole community jumps in to help people with homebrew ideas. Occasionally, Monty and I jump in there as well. So that is the best way to get in touch with us and have us hear about your ideas and thoughts. For subclasses, you're probably going to have to wait until we're doing one of these workshops.
Yeah.
Reviewing subclasses can be a little tricky. It's a lot to read through, and that's the best way really to get in on it.
Yeah, the subclasses are a big one. But because I feel like with that one, we to do a full review of someone's subclass submission, I think we could only do like 3 or 4 in a 2-hour workshop. So that it's those, and I think that there's a lot of people that are going to want to do those ones. So we might have to do a couple subclass workshops. I might even, one of the things we might do for the subclasses, Kelly, actually, is maybe make it an open submission, and then break it down by class, depending on how many we get. Yeah.
That could be cool. So
Yeah.
Some questions from chat. What advice do you have to create spells in a niche that exists to fulfill a very specific use case?
I have some thoughts. I have some thoughts on this, but
go ahead.
Okay. Watch out for making a golden hammer. The more niche your spell, if it is a niche spell and it fixes that problem, then have you just removed an interesting problem from your game? You know what I mean? Like imagine like we just, I don't know, we just had a spell that that was called like solve mystery, right? Like pretty niche. You have to solve a mystery, but it kind of removes the point of the adventure, right? But if we break it down into a more specific thing, like if you want to make a spell that is
Knock comes to mind.
yes, knock does come to mind. It's very niche, but it immediately solves the problem of getting past the door, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that I think is so just to reiterate what I think your advice here is if you are being niche, don't be niche in a way that solves a major plot device, but be niche in a way that solves a minor problem that could come up at the table.
Yeah, and some spells are already golden hammers, and I say that to be like, the game has a lot of golden hammers. Maybe we don't want to add that many more to it.
And
Yeah.
not to say that you can't, but just be aware of the golden hammer you're adding. And the last thing you want to do is create a spell that ends up making more work for you as a DM because you made this spell and now somebody has it and it's
Mhm.
messing with your game. But I think that niche spells are part of D&D. I love now the hard part is convincing somebody to take it. I love knock. I think it's a cool spell. I've never taken it because
Yeah.
there are better spells for me to take. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But you know,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's also, some people are mentioning that knock is loud, and that's actually a cool way that it actually counterbalances its solution to the problem by
yes.
adding a complication to it. So that's a good way to address that sort of problem, um and work within it.
Franistan asks, what's your recommendation for allowing homebrew spells in a campaign in progress? My recommendation is be honest with your players and set parameters as you're introducing them. Tell your players, hey, I'd like to introduce some homebrew spells. I'd like you guys to try them out. They are absolutely subject to change, and we might remove them, and I might let you pick new spells if they're not working properly at the table. So, in that way, you've already set yourself up for an exit strategy if the spell is causing problems. Playtesting is essential, and if you have an ongoing homebrew, or an ongoing campaign, you might want to dip them in. You could also take a week to do a one shot where everybody tries out the spells. But if you don't want to do that and you just want to keep plowing forward with your campaign, then just let everybody know that these spells might be tweaked, they might change, they might go through iterations, and they might get pulled out completely depending on how it goes.
Yeah. It's very easy to adapt and change as long as you have an understanding with your group that when you're using homebrew material, if it becomes a problem, you're going to have a conversation again to address it.
Um, Question: what are your thoughts on the sidekick system for running a game for one or two players? Monty, have you ever used sidekicks?
Um, Not in 5th edition.
I did. I ran a one-on-one campaign for my partner for a few sessions. And the sidekick, there was one interesting thing that came up that I didn't love. And that was I ended up making my sidekick a mute
Mm.
because I didn't want too much influence on the decision making as the DM. I don't like the idea of a DM PC. And so I just nodded or shook my head as the sidekick and allowed my partner to make all of the important decisions because I didn't want to take away the
Mm.
agency that she had as a player. So sidekicks, I think they're cool to help out a single player campaign, but be careful about making too many decisions. You don't
Yeah.
it sucks when you're the DM telling the story and deciding what to do next. There's no fun in that. You can be a soundboard to bounce yes or no answers off, and that's really all that I think a sidekick should ever be.
You know what I think? I I, the easy solution to it is make the
S-
sidekick an animal,
Yeah,
right? Like make the sidekick a dog.
yeah,
Make it an adorable doggo or whatever your player's favorite animal is, and immediately, because that also fits the fiction as well,
hmm
like
hmm
of the hero with their animal companion. Sidekicks are one of the perfect ways to handle that. I think Dale Kingsmill actually talked about this. I
yeah.
think she did a whole video where she talked about, like, maybe, I don't know if in that video she said to use the sidekick rules for animal companions, or whether she just said, like, give them an animal companion and be done with it. But I remember that um it works perfectly for a 1 or 2 player campaign, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Do you want to pick one more question? We probably have time for.
One more question. All right. Ooh. Um, I gotta find one here. Let's see.
Hey Monty, are you gonna upload that Ginny D?
Yes, it's coming.
Cool. All right, it's coming. Monty
um,
and I were both on vacation, and so the file sat there, and we haven't gotten around to uploading it yet. Sorry,
yeah,
everybody.
yeah,
We needed time off. We were away.
yeah. Um, how would you make a find familiar like spell for clerics? Um,
I would give them find familiar,
okay.
but make it an angel.
What if the find familiar spell for clerics was like having the angel and the devil sitting on your shoulder?
Okay, but only if they are the ones from Emperor's New Groove that Kronk has. I want that angel and that devil specifically.
Yeah. I think that yeah, or I would make it like a lantern archon. Like, I think lantern archons are like the little glowing balls. Like, I'm kind of I thought of this with the psychic thing, like Navi from Zelda as
Yeah,
well, like a little, like, fairy or angel creature, or a little imp that is sent to you by your deity. And I would probably make it so that the cleric find familiar is more of an advisor than a helper. Like, the wizard find familiar, you can use it in combat to, like, take the help action and stuff like that. But I think with the cleric, I would make it more of like, it can speak, but it's not going to help you in a fight. So it could be like a mouthpiece for your deity.
hmm.
Yeah, yeah, that might be an interesting way to make a cleric find familiar that's appropriate for, like, the religion, right? Or like imagine it being like, or like a raven appears, that, like, if your god is Thor or Odin, right? Like a messenger from your deity appears in an animal form and says something to you, right? Like, it could be
Yeah.
fine. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So, a lot more questions. So many questions that we immediately got are off the topic of the homebrew workshop. I appreciate all those questions, but we do want to stay focused on the Q and, like, the topic matter. But we're coming up. So I apologize if we didn't get it to any of your questions. We only took a couple from chat tonight, but very good questions nonetheless, and amazing submissions from all of our patrons as well for this week's workshop. We were always going to have general Q&As still in the mix, but these homebrew workshops have been very loudly demanded by our patrons, so we want to make sure that we do a couple more of them from now to the end of the year.
yeah, we have quite a bit of fun doing these and reading all of your really creative ideas. It also, like, it's fun to share inspiration. Really, at the end of the day, we're all creators. Everybody who plays D&D is a creator of some sort. We're all using our imagination, coming up with cool ideas, and sharing those ideas around just kind of helps inspire everybody. So if we did pick your spells, tonight. I hope that those spells go on to inspire other people, either to use these spells in their own game, obviously with the creator's blessing, or for the creators, if you are in our patron, which you will be, then pop in there with any revisions you end up making. Feel free to
Yeah.
discuss these spells, where you take them next. And maybe we can even get some playtests going in there for all of these spells, and
You bet.
get some people trying them out at their own tables and see how that goes. And I think that's just something really exciting to share with our like as a community, is these just sharing the creativity that everybody brings to the table when we're making cool stuff like this.
Awesome. Thank you all once again so much for watching, for contributing, for chatting. We will see you once again. We'll be back to our regular live streaming schedule for Drakkenheim starting next week, and we'll be having lots more of these Q&As coming up over the next couple months. So thank you once again. We'll see you at the next workshop.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.